Hey guys, tonight we're diving into how medieval peasants became lords. Forget everything Hollywood told you, this is the real story, and trust me, you probably wouldn't last a day. So before you get too comfortable, hit that like button if you enjoy this kind of deep dive, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a snack that isn't gruel, and let's jump in. Not to an alarm clock, but to the smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and the distinct aromatic presence of a pig that shares your one-room house. Congratulations, you're a medieval peasant. Your back already hurts. The year is, let's say, 1350. Your life expectancy is, let's not get into that. Your diet is 90% bread, and your biggest fear isn't the tax man. It's him, plus a bad harvest, plus the neighbor's cow getting murdery. Your name is what? Because 50% of all men were named what, Hob or Drogo? Yes, Drogo. Your dream isn't to be a lord. Your dream is to own a second shirt. So, how in the name of all that is holy do you, what the peasant, clad in your one sad shirt, end up as lord what of fancy pants manner? Well, let's get one thing straight. The ladder of medieval social mobility wasn't just slippery. It was covered in grease, on fire, and the guy at the top was actively throwing rocks at you. The system was designed to keep you where you were. But there were cracks. And to find them, we need to talk about the two great engines of upward mobility, war and the church. Suvat. You're sick of turning soil for a landlord who doesn't even know your name. You hear the local lord is raising a company for a campaign in France. The pay is theoretical. The conditions are horrific. But the opportunity? Unprecedented. You sign up. Not as a knight, you're not nobility, but as a man-at-arms, or more likely, a lowly archer or pikeman. Your life is now marching, dysentery, and trying not to get hit by a French knight who weighs more than your family's cottage. But here's the thing. War is chaos. And chaos is a ladder. If you're ruthless, lucky, and maybe a little bit clever, you can climb. Let's say your unit captures a wealthy French knight. Ransom protocol. That knight is worth more than every turnip in your village for the last century. Your cut of that ransom could buy you a better plot of land, a proper sword, and maybe, just maybe, the attention of your lord. Think of it as the world's most dangerous, least regulated side hustle. Instead of a gig economy, it's a stab economy. Now, let's say you survive a few campaigns. You're no longer what the peasant. You're what the grizzled veteran. The Lord trusts you. He makes you a sergeant, a constable of his little castle. Your management. You're wearing 2 shirts. You've officially entered the lower rungs of the nobility. It's a path paved with blood, luck, and a staggering body count. But what if you're not the stabby type? What if your talents lie elsewhere? Like reading? Welcome to the other crack in the system, the church. The original multinational corporation. Imagine you're a younger son with a sharp mind. Your local priest notices. He teaches you your letters. Suddenly, a door opens that was invisible to 99% of the population. You can read. You can write. You understand Latin, the operating system of power. You enter the church. Not as a priest saying mass in some muddy village, but as a clerk, a scribe, an administrator for a bishop or a monastery. You're now a bureaucrat. And let me tell you, a skilled bureaucrat in the Middle Ages was more powerful than a mediocre knight. You manage estates, you advise powerful men, you control information. You wear robes of fine wool, you eat well, and you sleep indoors. Always a plus. Through a combination of loyalty, competence, and maybe a little well-placed political scheming, you climb. Archdeacon? Bishop? It's possible. A bishop was a prince of the church, a landowner, a politician, a lord in all but name. You've traded a sword for a quill and you've won. Seriously, comment below, which path would you have chosen? The soldier's life of violent, high-risk opportunity? Or the clerk's life of quiet, administrative climbing? I'm genuinely curious. Now we've covered the two main tracks. But there's a third, a wild card that only showed up a few times in history. The Black Death. Okay, dark turn. In the mid-14th century, the plague wiped out a third to a half of Europe's population. Grim. Horrific. But for the peasants who survived, it was the greatest shift in labor relations ever. Suddenly, there are far fewer people to do all the work. Lords are desperate. The old system of serfdom, where you were tied to the land, begins to crack. You can now demand wages. Real, actual money for your work. If your lord says no, you can literally just walk to the next manor over where they're starving for laborers and get a better deal. Within a generation or two, successful peasant families could buy up land, become wealthy farmers, and slowly, painstakingly, gentrify their way into the lower gentry. It wasn't a knightly adventure or a clerical conspiracy. It was a slow, economic grind born from unimaginable tragedy. So there you have it. The paths from peasant to lord were narrow, treacherous, and required a brutal combination of luck, skill, and a willingness to exploit moments of extreme violence or societal collapse. It makes you think, doesn't it? Our modern ladders might look different, university, startups, the influencer economy, but the fundamental questions are the same. What skills do you have? What risks are you willing to take? And how much are you willing to bet on a lucky break? The dream of moving up in the world is ancient. What the peasant, staring at his lord's castle on the hill, probably dreamed the same dream we do. He just had to navigate a world where the rungs on the ladder were made of swords, parchment, and sometimes just survival. If you enjoyed this journey from the mud to the manor, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel more than you know. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay curious. So, you've survived the battlefield and escaped the scriptorium. You've dodged the plague and you're feeling ambitious. But let's be real, not everyone is cut out for swinging a poleaxe or memorizing papal decrees. What if your talents are more transactional? Welcome to the third, often overlooked path to lordship, commerce. Or as I like to call it, the grind. Picture this. You're still but you've had enough of the feudal grind. So you do something radical. You go to town. And I don't mean the village. I mean a proper town, a chartered town with walls, a marketplace, and that beautiful, beautiful smell of opportunity, which, to be clear, is layered over the stench of sewage and rotting fish. But here's the secret sauce. Town air makes you free. That was a real legal concept. Stadluft mocked free. Live within the town walls for a year and a day and poof, you're no longer a serf. You are a free man. You've just performed the greatest Houdini act of the Middle Ages. So what now? You need a trade. And not just any trade. You need a gilded trade. We're talking goldsmiths, spice merchants, wool merchants, armorers. The medieval equivalent of tech, finance, and luxury goods. You start as an apprentice. 7 years of fetching ale, sweeping floors, and getting yelled at by a master who has knuckles like gnarled oak. It's an unpaid internship, but with more physical danger and worse food. But you persevere. You become a journeyman. Literally, you journey to other towns to learn new techniques. This is the medieval version of a gap year, but you're working the whole time and your hostels are probably infested with fleas. Finally, after creating your masterpiece, you're in. You're a master of your guild. You have a shop, you have apprentices to bully, and most importantly, you have wealth that isn't tied to land. It's liquid. It's cash. And this is where the magic happens. Let's say you're a wool merchant. You're not just selling wool. You're controlling the entire supply chain. You're buying from English sheep farmers, financing the ships to transport it, selling it to Flemish weavers, and banking the profit. You become obscenely, vulgarly rich. Richer than the local knight whose family has owned land for centuries. He's land rich but cash poor. You're swimming in capital. And what does cash poor nobility need more than anything? Your money. That's right. You become the bank. You loan the local baron money to pay for his son's knighting ceremony, or his new warhorse, or to repair his drafty castle after a particularly rough winter. He can't pay you back? No problem. He can hand over a parcel of land. Or even better, he can offer you his daughter or son in marriage. Suddenly your grandson, the son of a once lowly merchant, is inheriting a title and a castle. You haven't just climbed the social ladder, you've bought the property at the top of it and evicted the previous tenants. This wasn't just a theory. This is how the de la Pole family went from home merchants to Earls of Suffolk. This is the Italian Medici playbook. They used loans to popes and kings to effectively buy their way into the nobility. They became the power behind the throne because they were the ATM for the throne. But let's get gritty. What does this life feel like? Imagine your back hurts, not from plowing, but from hunching over account books by candlelight. Your stress isn't from a bad harvest, but from a ship sinking in the channel, taking your entire investment to the bottom of the sea. Your risk management involves pirates, bandits, and shady business partners instead of murdery cows. Seriously, which is scarier? A French charge or an IOU from an irresponsible duke? Let me know in the comments. You trade the physical terror of war for the constant, gnawing anxiety of high finance. You're playing a game of economic chess where losing a key piece means debtor's prison or worse. But the payoff? The payoff is a dynasty. Okay, so you've got the money. You've acquired the land. Maybe you've even snagged a minor title through marriage. But you're not accepted. The old nobility looks at you and your family as upstarts. New money. The OGs of chivalry are side-eyeing you at every tournament. So begins the final, most delicate phase, the rebrand. You commission a family crest. You invent a suitably heroic and entirely fictional ancestor who came over with the conqueror. You pay a monk to write a flattering family history. You pour money into the local church, building a lavish chantry chapel so everyone knows you're pious and loaded. You stop acting like a merchant and start acting like a lord. You learn to hunt, to hawk, to speak French, the language of the nobility. You educate your sons-in-law and send them to serve in a noble household as pages. You are, quite literally, performing nobility until the performance becomes reality. Could take 2, 3, even 4 generations. The first generation makes the fortune, the second generation consolidates it with land and political office, and the third generation, born in a manor and educated as a gentleman, finally has the effortless arrogance of the class they bought into. So there you have it, the merchant's path. It wasn't about a single heroic act. It was about relentless accumulation. It was a long, calculated campaign of social climbing that makes any modern influencer's brand strategy look amateurish. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? We talk about old money and new money, but every old money family has a founder. A first generation who, through luck, violence, faith, or finance, did the impossible. They broke the mold. They looked at a world designed to keep them in the mud and they said, no. They used a sword, a quill, a ledger book, or simply the grim arithmetic of survival to claw their way up. The next time you see a castle on a hill, don't just think of the lord who lived there. Think of the ambitious, ruthless, or brilliantly lucky peasant, miles away and centuries ago, who started the chain of events that put his descendant in that high hall. If this deep dive into the ruthless world of medieval social climbing has you hungry for more, you know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe for more journeys into the past, and let me know in the comments. What modern skill do you think would have made you a fortune in the Middle Ages? Coding? Marketing? Memes? Alright, you've mastered the art of war, you've decoded the bureaucracy of the church, and you've amassed a mercantile fortune that would make a king blush. But what if I told you there was a fourth path? A path that required neither a sword, a rosary, nor a ledger? A path built not on violence, piety, or commerce, but on service. And I don't mean military service. I'm talking about the art of the climb, medieval corporate style. Let's reset. You're what? But this time you're not in a village. You're in a castle. Not as a lord, not as a knight, but as staff. You're a servant. But not just any servant. You're smart. You're observant. You notice things. Maybe you started as a stable hand who realized that knowing which lord prefers which horse is valuable intelligence. Maybe you're a cook's apprentice who understands that controlling the spice cabinet is a form of low-level geopolitical power. Or, and this is the golden ticket, maybe you're literate. You can read and write, but the monastic life isn't for you. So you get a job as a clerk in the local lord's household. This is your new ecosystem. Forget the open battlefield or the open market. Your world is now a labyrinth of corridors, whispered conversations, and unspoken hierarchies. Your goal is to make yourself indispensable to the man at the top. You start by managing the household accounts. You notice the chamberlain is skimming off the top. Do you accuse him outright? No. That's amateur hour. You quietly gather evidence and present it to your lord at the right moment. The chamberlain is dismissed. Guess who just got promoted? You're now the keeper of the purse. The key holder. The steward. Your power is now immense but entirely derivative. You have no land, no title of your own. But you control access. You decide which petitions reach your lord's ears. You manage his estates in his absence. You become his confidant, the one person he trusts to handle the messy, unglamorous business of actually running his domain. You are the chief operations officer of Fiefdom Incorporated. And when your lord is called to serve his king, you go with him. Now you're at the royal court. The stakes are higher, the players are sharper, and the opportunities are astronomical. Let's say the king is expanding his administration. He needs capable men who are loyal directly to him, not to some old, powerful baron with a suspiciously large army. He needs bureaucrats, tax collectors, judges. And you, what the steward, with your decades of experience managing a complex lordship, are a perfect candidate. You get a royal appointment. You are now a royal clerk, an exchequer official, a justice of the peace. This is the ultimate hack. You are now a servant of the crown. Your authority doesn't come from your bloodline, it comes from a royal writ. And that writ can be more powerful than a duke's sword. You travel the country, auditing the king's accounts, presiding over courts, collecting his taxes. You make powerful enemies, but you have the one friend that matters, the monarch. And how does this lead to lordship? Simple. The king rewards loyalty. Faithful service is paid in land, the one thing that truly transforms a family's status. You uncover a plot against the king? You successfully manage the finances for a costly war? You help dismantle the power of a rebellious earl? Your reward isn't just a bag of coins. It's a manor, or several, confiscated from one of those enemies you made along the way. It might start small, a grant of a few hundred acres. But now you're not just what the servant. You're what the landowner. You're a country gentleman. Your son will be educated as a squire. Your daughter will marry a knight. Within a generation or two, your grandson is being referred to as Sir What's His Name, and the origin story, the great-grandfather who was the king's most trusted fixer, is polished into a tale of loyal and honorable service, the gritty details of account books and political knife fights conveniently forgotten. Think of it as the ultimate corporate promotion. You started in the mailroom, the stables, became a department head, the steward, got headhunted by the parent company, the crown, and were finally given equity in the form of land, making you a partner. The medieval version of getting stock options and a corner office. But let's talk about the psychological toll. The soldier risks his body. The merchant risks his capital. The cleric risks his soul. The royal servant? He risks his self. Your entire life is a performance. You must be humble but ambitious, loyal but cunning, invisible but indispensable. You have to master the art of the suggestion, making the lord or king believe your idea was his own. You navigate a world of petty jealousies and deadly rivalries, where a misplaced word can end your career or your life. You're building your legacy on a foundation of someone else's power. It's the most precarious path of all. So we've walked these four roads: the warrior, the cleric, the merchant, and the courtier. Each one a testament to human ingenuity in the face of a rigid system. But it makes me wonder, what about the ones who didn't play by the rules at all? What about the outlaws? The pirates? The mercenary captains who sold their loyalty to the highest bidder? The women who navigated this entire system not through their own action, but through brilliant, often ruthless, marital and political strategy? The story of social mobility in the Middle Ages is so much darker, weirder, and more fascinating than we've even begun to cover. But that is a tale for another time. If you're desperate to hear about the medieval rogue who became a lord, or the woman who manipulated her way to power, let me know in the comments. That like button isn't just a like button, it's a petition. And subscribe if you want your personal writ of summons to our next deep dive into history's shadows. So we've talked about the paths of the sword, the scripture, the ledger, and the royal seal. All brilliant, all demanding a certain adherence to the system. You work within the machinery even as you seek to conquer it. But what about those who looked at the entire creaking edifice of feudal society and decided to just kick the door in? Forget playing the game. We're about to talk about those who stole the game board. Let's set the scene. The year is 1400. The king is weak, a plague has swept through, and the countryside is crawling with displaced soldiers, bitter peasants, and ambitious minor nobles with a serious chip on their shoulder. The rule of law is flexible. This, my friends, is the breeding ground for the most dangerous and unpredictable path of all: raw, violent opportunism. Meet our new protagonist. Let's call him... what? Cade sounds sharper. More dangerous. Cade wasn't born to serve. He was born to take. Maybe he was a soldier who came home from the French wars to find his land given to someone else. Maybe he was a dispossessed petty noble, a younger son with nothing but a sword and a seething resentment. Or maybe he was just a very, very successful bandit. His method is simple, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. He doesn't ask. He takes. He gathers a band of similarly desperate men, veterans, outlaws, runaway serfs. This isn't a feudal levy, it's a startup, and the venture capital is violence. Their first target? A poorly defended but wealthy manor house belonging to a lord who's away at court. They strike at night. They overwhelm the skeleton guard, they seize the stores, the silver, the armor. But Cade is clever. He doesn't just loot and burn. He holds. He barricades himself inside. When the local sheriff arrives with a posse, Cade doesn't flee. He negotiates. From a position of strength behind someone else's walls. He's not just a robber, he's a geopolitical fact on the ground. This is where the real dark arts begin. Cade uses his ill-gotten gains to bribe officials, to create alliances with other disgruntled locals. He presents himself as a champion of the common people, righting the wrongs of a corrupt lord. He becomes a folk hero and a terrorist, all rolled into one. And if a major rebellion breaks out, like the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, that's Cade's Super Bowl. In the chaos, he and his band can become the de facto rulers of an entire region. They can execute hated officials, seize castles, and for a brief, blazing moment they are the law. But this path is a tightrope over a chasm. The established powers hate a usurper more than anything. A rival lord you can marry your daughter to. A merchant you can borrow money from. But a man who proves that the system is just wood and stone, and that both can be broken, he must be made an example of. Most of these men ended up on the gallows, their bodies left to rot as a warning. But a handful, a cunning, ruthless, and phenomenally lucky handful, survived the backlash. So how does Cade the Outlaw become Lord Cade? He doesn't. Not exactly. The title never comes. But the power, the land, the reality of lordship? That he can grasp. The crown, exhausted by war and rebellion, might offer him a pardon. Not out of mercy, but out of sheer pragmatism. It's cheaper to pardon a troublesome bandit than to lay siege to every fortified manor he's stolen. The pardon comes with conditions. He must disband his band, swear fealty, and oh, by the way, he can keep the lands he seized, now officially granted to him by the king. The act of theft is retroactively legitimized. It's the ultimate fake-it-till-you-make-it strategy, where making it involves the king looking at your sprawling illegal empire and saying, "You know what? Fine. Just stop bothering me." Alternatively, a major lord, seeing Cade's effectiveness, might offer him a formal contract, not as a knight but as a mercenary captain. A condottiere. Now, his violence is a sanctioned business. He's paid to fight other lords, and his payment is often, you guessed it, land and a title to wash away his past sins. He becomes a useful monster, let off the leash to bite the king's enemies. And useful monsters sometimes get to retire as respected gentlemen. But let's be clear. The life of an usurper is one of constant paranoia. You sleep with one eye open forever. The friends you have are bought, not earned. Your children will carry the stain of your origins, the whispers of brigand blood, in the courtly halls they now inhabit. You traded a short, brutal life as a nobody for a long, treacherous life as a somebody with a colossal target on his back. You didn't climb the ladder, you blew a hole in the wall and moved into the house. And everyone inside remembers you weren't invited. So there we have it. The 5 faces of ambition: the warrior, the cleric, the merchant, the courtier, and the outlaw. 5 different answers to the same desperate question: how do I get to the top? It makes our modern struggles for a promotion or a better salary seem almost quaint, doesn't it? But the core human drive is the same. The hunger for security, for respect, for a legacy. We see it in the soldier's courage, the clerk's patience, the merchant's calculation, the courtier's subtlety, and even the outlaw's rage. They all looked at a world that said, "Know your place," and replied with a simple, powerful, "No." So I'll leave you with this. In the grand, brutal tapestry of history, which thread would you have been? The unbreakable sword, the patient pen, the heavy coin, the whispering word, or the shattered lock? Alright, we've chronicled the epic climbs, the bloody grabs for power, the financial coups. We've followed the singular, ambitious man, the what, the Cade, on his brutal journey upwards. But what if the story isn't about one man? What if the most profound and often most successful path to power wasn't about individual brilliance at all, but about the slow, stubborn, collective will of an entire community? Forget about you for a moment. Let's talk about us. You are not a lone wolf. You are a member of the village of Mudford-under-Ditch. And for generations, Mudford has belonged to Lord Borington, who lives in a castle 3 days' ride away and whose chief interaction with you is sending his bailiff to collect your rent, your labor, and your best chickens. Your life is defined by obligations. You owe him days of back-breaking work on his domain, the corvée. You must grind your grain at his mill, bake your bread in his oven, and for these privileges you pay him again. It's a system designed to keep you exhausted, poor, and in your place. But then a catalyst, maybe a new, even more extortionate bailiff arrives. Maybe Lord Borington raises the rent to fund a pointless war. Or maybe, just maybe, the Black Death has thinned the population enough that you realize your labor has value. You have leverage. The village, led by a few clear-headed elders and a hot-headed blacksmith, holds a secret meeting in the woods. The decision is made: you will go on strike. This isn't a violent revolt. It's a work stoppage. When the bailiff comes to demand your labor for the Lord's harvest, you simply don't go. You tend to your own fields instead. The entire village does. The bailiff is furious. He threatens. But what is he going to do? Arrest the entire village? There's no one to plant the Lord's crops. The Lord's own harvest will rot in the field. This is the medieval version of a trade union negotiation, and you're about to enter collective bargaining. After a tense standoff, a compromise is reached. You, the village of Mudford, will pay Lord Borington a large one-time sum of money. In return, he will grant you a Charter of Liberties. This piece of parchment is your Declaration of Independence. It transforms you from serfs, people legally tied to the land and the Lord's will, into copy holders or even free tenants. It commutes your labor obligations into a fixed monetary rent. It gives you the right to inherit your land, to sell your lease, to marry whom you please without the Lord's permission. You haven't become lords of a manor, but you have become the masters of your own lives. This is a different kind of lordship, the lordship of self-determination. And this collective power isn't just for farmers. Let's take it to the town. Imagine you're a guild of weavers in the city of Norwich. You're skilled, you're organized, and you control a lucrative industry. But you're politically powerless, ruled by a mayor appointed by the crown or a local baron. So you flex your economic muscle. You and the other major guilds, the merchants, the goldsmiths, the drapers, pool your resources. You offer the crown a massive low-interest loan. Or you promise a huge annual tax payment, a fee farm. Your price? A royal charter. This charter grants your town the right to self-governance. You can elect your own mayor, your own council, your own sheriffs and judges. You make your own bylaws, hold your own courts, and control your own defense. The king's sheriff is locked out of the gates. The town becomes a collective lord over its own territory, a city republic in all but name. The individuals who lead this movement, the guild masters who become mayors, the wealthy burghers who become aldermen, don't get individual titles of nobility. They become an urban patriciate. They live in stone houses that are practically mansions. They wear clothes as fine as any baron's. Their daughters marry knights, and their sons go to university. They wield power through commerce and council meetings, not through feudal oaths. They are the oligarchs of the cobblestone world. Think of it as the ultimate corporate merger. The guilds of Norwich incorporate, acquire the land rights from the crown, and install their own CEO, the mayor. It's less dramatic than a sword fight, but arguably more effective in the long run. So we end not with a lone hero, but with a community. Not with a bloody siege, but with a negotiated settlement. Not with a crown on one head, but with a collective sigh of relief from hundreds. This path lacks the glamour of the battlefield. There's no epic ballad written about the Great Mudford Rent Strike of 1382. But in many ways, this collective action was more sustainable, more profound, and liberated more people than the spectacular rise of any single individual. It proves that the most resilient power isn't always seized from above. Sometimes it's built from the ground up, brick by patient brick, by people who realized that together, they were stronger than any lord. It makes you look at our world differently, doesn't it? Our labor laws, our property rights, our local governments, these weren't just handed down. They were fought for, bargained for, and paid for by countless anonymous communities who refused to accept their lot. So, the next time you watch a show about a lone king on a throne, remember the quiet, stubborn power of the village that said, "No more," and the town that bought its own freedom. So I put it to you. Which form of power seems more enduring to you? The glory of the lone lord in his castle, or the quiet, collective strength of the chartered town? The comments are your council chamber. Let the debate begin. And if you want to be part of this community of history lovers, that subscribe button is your own personal charter. Grant yourself the rights and privileges of a channel member. So far, every path we've walked has been paved with something tangible. Steel, silver, secrets, or sheer numbers. But I've saved the most subtle, the most intellectually devious path for last. This is the story of how the sharpest mind in a generation could bend the entire system to its will without ever lifting a sword. Forget the battlefield. Forget the marketplace. Welcome to the ultimate arena of power, the university. Let's reintroduce our hero. Your let's call him Alaric. You are the son of a well-off but non-noble Franklin, a free farmer. You're not strong enough to be a man-at-arms, you lack the mercantile instinct, and the thought of courtly intrigue makes you nauseous. But you have a mind that devours information. You remember everything you hear. You look at a page of scripture and see not just holy words, but patterns, arguments, and loopholes. You are, in the parlance of our times, a giant nerd. And your village priest, recognizing this, does one of the most powerful things possible. He teaches you Latin. That knowledge is your ticket. You scrape together every penny your family can spare and you walk to Oxford, or Bologna, or Paris. You arrive in a world that is both terrifying and exhilarating. It's a chaotic, international, and often violent commune of intellectuals. You live in a squalid rented room with 3 other students. You are constantly broke, hungry, and cold. You argue philosophy in taverns, you get into brawls with townsfolk, and you study by the light of a single tallow candle that smells worse than the pig you left behind. So, the quintessential university experience. Some things are truly timeless. For years you endure this. You study the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. Then the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. This isn't just education, it's mental boot camp. You are learning to think, to argue, and to persuade with a weaponized precision that no uneducated baron could ever hope to match. But here's where you make your crucial choice. You don't just become a master of arts. You specialize. And the most powerful specialization isn't medicine or theology. It's law. Specifically, canon law, the law of the church. What? Because the church is the largest, richest, and most bureaucratic organization in Europe. It owns 1/3 of the land. Its courts have jurisdiction over everything from marriage and inheritance to sin and salvation. And it runs on paperwork. You become a doctor of canon law. You are now a jurist. You are no longer a petitioner. You are the one who interprets the rules of the game. You are recruited directly into the papal curia in Rome or the court of a powerful archbishop. Your job? To untangle the most complex legal and political disputes in Christendom. A king wants to divorce his wife? He needs your legal opinion. A bishop and a local baron are fighting over land rights? You parse the charters and issue the ruling. The Pope wants to exert his authority over a rebellious monarch? You draft the bull. You are the equivalent of a Supreme Court justice, a top corporate lawyer, and a political strategist, all rolled into one. And your power is absolute because it is based on an authority that even kings must, in theory, respect: the law of God. Now let's talk about rewards. They aren't called fiefs anymore. They're benefices. A wealthy parish in the countryside, the income from a monastery and archdeaconry, all can be granted to you in absentia. You don't have to live there. You just collect the revenue while you continue your work at the center of power. You amass a portfolio of these benefices. You are wealthier than most barons. You build a palatial townhouse. You patronize artists. You are, for all intents and purposes, a lord. A clerical lord, but a lord nonetheless. And then comes the ultimate prize. The king, tired of being outmaneuvered by church lawyers, decides he needs his own. He creates a new kind of court, like the Court of Chancery in England, staffed by men who understand this new, complex legal world. Men like you. The king makes you his chancellor. You are now the highest-ranking official in the land, second only to the king himself. You control the royal seal. You are the head of the judiciary. A low-born scholar now has more direct, daily power over the kingdom than any duke or earl whose family pride themselves on 1,000 years of brute force. Your father was a farmer. You are the king's chancellor. Your grandson will be a duke. Think about that. While the barons were busy jousting and feuding, the nerds were quietly taking over the entire apparatus of the state. This isn't a hostile takeover, it's an intellectual eclipse. The guy who never gets the girl in the Hollywood movie? In real life, he ended up taxing the handsome knight. So, we end our journey not with a battle cry, but with the soft scratch of a quill on parchment. The path of the scholar jurist is the longest, the most demanding, and in many ways the most revolutionary. It proves that in the long arc of history, the pen is not just mightier than the sword, it's more durable. Swords break, dynasties die out, but a legal precedent, a bureaucratic system, a way of thinking, that can last for centuries. The men who climbed this path didn't break the system. They mastered it so completely that they became its new architects. It makes you look at our own world, doesn't it? At the tech CEOs who started in garages, the policymakers who shape our lives from think tanks, the lawyers who navigate the labyrinth of modern regulation. The landscape has changed, but the principle is the same. True, enduring power is increasingly vested not in those who control the land, but in those who control the code, whether it's written in Latin legalese or Python. So, I leave you with this final heretical thought. Was the quiet scholar in his study, deciphering the secrets of divine and natural law, ultimately a more formidable agent of change than the most celebrated knight in Christendom? The comment section is now your doctoral disputation. Defend your thesis. And if you want to continue this deep dive into the hidden engines of history, subscribing is the modern equivalent of receiving your own royal charter. Thanks for watching, guys. Remember, the most dramatic revolutions aren't always fought in the fields. Sometimes they're won in the library.